Welcome to Fun Facts Daily, your source for just the good stuff. Monday through Friday, we're bringing fun facts and news you can use, all carefully curated to uplift and inform. So give yourself a break, relax, and learn something awesome in just a few minutes every day. Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Wood. Today, we're going to be learning all about the mysterious and fascinating history of spirit photography. But before we get into the facts, let's warm up our brains with a little challenge to see if you can tell fact from fiction. Consider this. Spirit photography became so popular and so controversial in the 19th century, the process was actually put on trial. I mean that literally, there was a sensational trial in a real court of law. The most famous spirit photographer of the day was arrested and put on trial for fraud, with none other than the famous circus showman P.T. Barnum testifying in court to explain how the ghost tricks were really done. What do you think? Did such a ghost trial actually happen? Would a judge really let their courtroom become such a circus? We'll find out at the end of the episode. Now for your word of the day. Today's word is ectoplasm. That's E-C-T-O-P-L-A-S-M. In the world of spiritualism and ghost hunting, ectoplasm is a supposed physical substance that spirits or ghosts are said to produce when they manifest in our world. In classic early 20th century spirit photographs, it often looked like a gauzy, stringy, or cheesecloth-like substance. Photographers would capture images of this ectoplasm floating in the air, or even coming from the nose or mouth of a medium who was supposedly channeling a spirit. The word was coined around 1894 by a French physiologist named Charles Richet. He combined two Greek words, ektos, E-C-T-O-S, meaning outside, and plasma, meaning something formed or molded. So ectoplasm literally means a substance formed on the outside. Richet, who was studying mediums, intended the word to sound very scientific to describe this bizarre, unknown material. The term became so popular that it was eventually adopted by mainstream biology, but for something completely different. Today, ectoplasm also refers to the clear outer layer of the cytoplasm, the jelly-like substance inside a living cell, like an amoeba. Time for your daily high five, our top 5 fun facts about spirit photography. Number 1, the entire industry of spirit photography was launched by one man in Boston and a famous first lady. In the 1860s, a Boston engraver and amateur photographer named William H. Mumler was developing a self-portrait when he noticed a second shadowy figure in the image. He claimed it was the ghost of his deceased cousin. Word spread quickly, and his spirit photography business exploded. This new trend arrived at a perfect time. The spiritualism movement was popular, and tragically, many families were grieving the losses from the Civil War and desperate for any sign that their loved ones were still with them. Mumler's photos offered tangible, visible, quote, proof that people were craving. His studio became famous, and he produced spirit portraits for many clients, including, most famously, a grieving Mary Todd Lincoln. His portrait of the former First Lady shows her in black mourning clothes with the faint, transparent figure of her late husband, President Abraham Lincoln, standing behind her with his hands resting on her shoulders. This single iconic image cemented spirit photography in the public's imagination. Number 2. Most, quote, spirit photos were actually clever darkroom tricks using a technique called double exposure. The ghostly effect that baffled so many people was, in most cases, a surprisingly simple photographic illusion. The most common method was double exposure. A photographer would first create a ghost image on the plate negative, often an assistant dressed in a sheet or even just a faint picture from a magazine. Then they would use the same glass plate, which already had the faint ghost image on it, to take the main portrait of the living customer. When the plate was developed, the pre exposed ghost image would appear to be floating right in the room with the sitter. Other photographers had different methods. Some would have an assistant wrapped in a sheet sneak into frame during a very long exposure, standing still for a few seconds and then sneaking out, leaving a ghostly trace. Others would use smoke, mirrors, or even just etch figures onto the negative. And just as a little bonus fun fact for you, if you've ever wondered where that image of a ghost draped in a sheet came from, well, back in the day, people tended to assume that a ghost would come back in the clothes they were wearing when they departed, and since most people were wrapped in a burial shroud, it seemed logical that a ghost would come wearing a shroud or a sheet. Number 3. The famous magician Harry Houdini was one of the world's greatest skeptics, dedicating his life to exposing fake spirit photographers. Harry Houdini wasn't just an escape artist. He was a passionate investigator of supernatural claims. He deeply despised mediums and spirit photographers whom he saw as cruel frauds preying on the hopes of the grieving families. Houdini himself had wished to contact his own deceased mother, but found only trickery. Because he was so skilled with illusions, he knew exactly how all the tricks were done. Houdini could replicate any spirit or ectoplasm stunt that was shown to him, proving it was all man-made. He served on a committee for Scientific American magazine that offered a large cash prize to any medium who could prove their supernatural abilities under controlled, scientific conditions. Despite many attempts, not a single person ever managed to claim the prize. Houdini even wrote a book called A Magician Among the Spirits, detailing exactly how these illusions were performed. Number 4. Today's most common spirit photos, glowing orbs, have a simple scientific explanation: backscatter. With the invention of digital cameras and powerful built-in flashes, a new kind of spirit started to appear in photos: the floating glowing orb. You've probably seen them in your own pictures, especially ones taken at night in old, dusty attics. Ghost hunters often claim these orbs are spirit energy, but the scientific explanation is much more down to earth. The phenomenon is officially known as backscatter, or an orb artifact. This happens because the camera's flash is very close to the camera's lens. The flash illuminates tiny, out-of-focus particles that are floating in the air in front of the camera. These particles are almost always just dust motes, pollen, tiny insects, or even raindrops or snowflakes. Because they're so close to the lens, the camera can't focus on them, and they're blurred into a bright, circular orb we see in the final picture. It's not a ghost, it's just your camera's flash lighting up the dust. And our fifth and final fun fact for today: many of the ghosts we see in photos, or really anywhere else, are just our brains playing tricks on us with a process called pareidolia. Have you ever seen a face in a cloud, man in the moon, or a spooky figure in a blurry, dark photograph? This is your brain's amazing pattern recognition system working just a little too well. The official term for this is pareidolia. It's a psychological phenomenon where our minds respond to a vague or random image, like wood grain or a patch of static, by perceiving a familiar pattern, and that pattern is almost always a human face. This is a deeply human evolutionary trait. Our ancestors needed to be able to spot a predator's face hiding in the bushes very, very quickly. It was always safer to have a false positive, thinking a rock was a tiger, rather than a false negative, thinking a tiger was a rock. This means we're hardwired to look at a random collection of shadows, light, or smudges and find the shape of a person or a face, which can make any shadowy environment or photo seem very spooky. Now for some news you can use. Want to make your own spooky fun spirit photograph for Halloween or just to play around with images? You can easily create a classic 19th century effect using pretty much any phone. The key is double exposure, and many free photo editing apps can handle it beautifully. First, you want to put your camera on a tripod. It's really important for these double exposures that you keep the camera as steady as possible. So you're going to take a picture of your ghost. It could be you if you set the timer on your camera, or a friend. They could be dressed however you'd like, maybe wearing a white sheet for a classic sort of campy ghost look. But put your ghost in a dimly lit room and take a picture. Then, without moving the camera at all, have your friend or you step out of frame and take a second identical picture of the empty room. In a photo editing app, you import both photos and put the ghost picture on a layer on top of the empty room picture. Then, just find the opacity or transparency slider for the top layer and lower it to about 30 or 40%. It's a fun, modern way to replicate the exact tricks that amazed people 150 years ago. Now for the moment you've been waiting for. At the beginning of the episode, I asked if a famous spirit photographer was really put on trial for fraud in a sensational trial with none other than P.T. Barnum testifying against him. Well, that's a fact. In 1869, William Mumler, the photographer who famously took the photo of Mary Todd Lincoln and Lincoln's ghost, was put on trial for fraud in New York. The trial was a media circus. The prosecution called P.T. Barnum to the stand. He was a master of humbug and illusion himself, and he testified that it was incredibly easy to create fake ghost photos. He even had a photo commissioned that showed himself with the ghost of Abraham Lincoln, just to prove how simple the trick was. In the end, Mumler was actually acquitted, not because the ghosts were real, but because the prosecution couldn't prove exactly how Mumler was creating his specific fakes. Now, I hope you enjoyed learning a bit about spirit photography with me today, and be sure to tune in every weekday for even more fun facts. Fun Facts Daily is an Airwave Media podcast. It was written, recorded, mixed, and edited by me, Kyle Wood. Thanks for sharing a part of your day with me. Be sure to follow Fun Facts Daily on your favorite podcast app so you can keep the good stuff coming your way every day. And if you like the show, please do me a favor and leave a kind rating, review, or just tell your friends about it.